The board now reconvenes this meeting of the Plano ISD Board of Trustees in open session at 5:39 p.m. on May 16th at the Plano ISD Administration Building. Good evening. I'm Missy Bender, President of the Plano ISD Board of Trustees. On the board's behalf, I wish to extend a warm welcome to all who are present and to our web and video viewers. We will conduct our meeting focusing on the district's two major goals. Number one, ensure the continued improvement in student learning, and number two, ensure the efficient use of resources. Let me introduce my fellow trustees and staff. Seated to my left are Dr. Brian Bengali, Superintendent of Schools, Nancy Humphrey, Board Vice President, Trustees Tammy Richards and David Stolley, Susan Modisette, the Assistant Superintendent for Campus Services, Dr. Matthew Gutierrez, the Assistant Superintendent for Employee Services, and Dr. Jim Wuso, Assistant Superintendent for Academic Services. Seated to my right were Carolyn Mobius, but she's in the back now, Marilyn Hinton, who's coming down here and will join us in just a minute, Dr. Carrie Cooper, Dr. Yorm Solomon.
The other doctor.
I'm sorry, I skipped forward. Dr. Carrie Cooper, Assistant Superintendent for District Services, Steve Fortenberry, Chief Financial Officer, Dan Armstrong, Assistant Superintendent for Technology Services, Carla Oliver, our Assistant Superintendent for Government, Community and Planning Initiatives, and Denise Gillespie, our Executive Assistant to the Superintendent and Board of Trustees. I would like to now thank members of our help desk for serving as greeters and for distributing the agendas and comment cards this evening. Please join us in applauding these staff members for their assistance this evening. At this time, Trustee Yorm Solomon will share an inspirational message. Dr. Solomon?
Okay. As you probably know, 10 days ago we had elections, and in fact, two new trustees are going to take the oath of office today, as you'll see soon. And I wanted to share a few thoughts about being a trustee and about elections and the importance of elections. First of all, as you probably know, we don't get paid. We don't get paid at all. And so it takes a lot for someone to run and stick their neck out. And it is important. We do that not sometimes. I know that I was asked if I do that because of my daughters, to help my daughters. You don't do that for your kids. You do that at the expense of your families. And there are three things that I wanted to share. One is voter turnout. This last elections, we actually had an amazing 14.4% of people with voting rights who actually voted in the elections. Our average is 5%. And the funny thing is that the majority of our lives happen here locally, in the city, in the county, in the district. And yet 70% will go and vote for a president, and only 5% will vote for city council and school board trustees. 5% is not a lot. Your vote matters. And I know that sometimes people think that it doesn't matter, but we all remember 2000, Bush versus Gore. More than 5.9 million people voted. The difference between the winner and the loser was 537 votes, less than 0.01%. And it goes on and on. I saw that there were elections that were won by two people. There was an election in Alaska for state senate that was won by one. And there was an election in Mississippi where it was a perfect tie for state representative. It was a perfect tie, and it was actually settled by, believe it or not, pulling the long straw. The person who pulled the long straw became state representative. And if you think that happened in 1839, that happened in 2015, 2 years ago. The last thing that I wanted to say about the elections is the language, the discourse that took place during the elections. And I really, really, really hope that in next elections we're going to have better discourse. Thank you. With that, please join me in the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
We now move on to the recognition part of the agenda. Ms. Oliver, do we have student guests to be recognized this evening?
No, ma'am, we don't.
Thank you. We have another recognition that we'd like to do at this time, and that is a board member recognition. The board would like to take this opportunity to recognize retiring board member Marilyn Hinton, who is now leading the board this evening. Marilyn has served 2 terms as a trustee, originally elected in May 2013. Marilyn, would you please stand? Marilyn. We want to thank you for your dedication to the education of our district students. We also want to recognize your family, particularly your husband, Dr. Jim Hinton, for their support of your involvement in Plano ISD, and we wish you much future success. Nancy, would you mind sharing with Marilyn? There's a gift down there for her. Present that to Marilyn, and then we'll give trustees just a minute to maybe share a few words of reflection about Marilyn, and then Marilyn, I'll ask you if you'd like to share a few words as well. So, trustees, if you'd like to share anything.
Congratulations. You're welcome.
Marilyn, it has been a joy to serve with you. There was an old commercial by E.F. Hutton, the financial services company. When E.F. Hutton talks, everyone listens. You were not one to talk just to hear your voice. You were one to talk when you had something important to say. And I value that so much in your contribution, particularly when it comes to character education, early childhood, diversity education. So thank you for being a bright, clear voice for issues that need to be serviced.
Well, I've known Marilyn for the past 7 years as a fellow trustee and a close friend. We became friends right off the bat. We bonded immediately, and the first experience I remember was our ride down to graduation. Where's Carolyn?
She left.
Did she? Okay. It's a private joke. Anyway, I've enjoyed the time we've spent in training sessions, whether it was in Fort Worth or Boston or here in the building. Loved every moment of it. And my son Spencer has a soft spot for you. And I know if he could be here, he'd give you a handshake or a hug. But more importantly, Marilyn's passion for the success of all students is incomparable. And her service to the community has been tremendous. She makes time to mentor children in Plano ISD schools because she cares so much for children and for making a positive difference in the lives of children who might have not had an advocate in their home. Marilyn is always generous and open-minded. Kind of the E.F. Hutton comment fits here. Marilyn often brings a perspective to a situation that hasn't been thought of yet. And she always has the best interest of children in her sights, whether it's supporting early childhood programs, providing expanded resources for underperforming campuses, or her crusade for character education. Thank you, Marilyn.
I don't know that there's much more to be said. I think that Marilyn can best be described as a quiet warrior. And many meetings, we would all be talking probably more than I needed to from this particular point of view. And then Marilyn will come up with the comment that brings everything together and brought the conversation together. And so for that, that skill, I appreciated every minute of those. Mostly, I will miss you. That what people don't know is when we go out of town on conventions, Marilyn is always my dinner date. So I will miss you for that as well. But thank you for your service. It was an honor, and it's an honor being your friend.
I talked about elections. My first run at the board was 2013 for the same place that Marilyn was at, and Marilyn won. And when I said something about the discourse of the election, we were friends throughout the elections. We were not adversarial. I remember congratulating her the day after. But still, we ran for the same place. So you would think. And I remember one day, out of the blue, at the beginning of a board meeting, Marilyn turned to me and she said that somebody had asked her, how is she getting along with me, with the fact that we ran against each other? And I'm not going to share what she said, but I'll tell you that I had tears based on her answer to that person. So thank you for everything you did. Thank you for being a friend.
So I can't really add a lot more dimension to what's been shared. But what I can say is that, Marilyn, you're a classy lady. And as others have mentioned, you brought a voice to the table that was needed. And you added value in your independent thought processes. And you always had a smile and something nice to say about everything and everyone. So I wish you the very happiest of days as you now have free Tuesday nights and Wednesday days and Friday afternoons and Mondays to just enjoy your family. We will miss you, but we will stay in touch. Thank you for your service and the sacrifice that you and your whole family have made for the betterment of our district and our children.
So is this one I can speak now?
Yes.
Okay. Well, for you in the audience who didn't know, we were all upstairs and Missy asked the board members who were leaving to give some advice to the board members who were coming in. And one of the things that I said was, be careful of your health and never neglect it or never realize that it takes back seat, because after a while, you may start to have problems that you will have trouble getting rid of later. And so one of the things I realized after I said that was that there are some advantages in the fact that I thought that my health problems really united the board, because everybody came to help me and support me. And that was really a pleasure. And Steve Fortenberry used to tease me all the time about it, which made me laugh. And I just want to say that Dan Armstrong used to really support me on technology. I would have tiny little problems, and he felt, oh, this is amazing, I've got help. And Carlo was just super all the time. And Carrie, I talked to him one night, and he was just so sweet. And it was about 11 o'clock at night when I called him. And he was sweet anyway. And Jim went to go visit some people in Dallas that I never thought he would, but it's really made a difference, though. And Matt used to get dinner for me, which was really nice. And Susan has done so many wonderful things for me and her husband that I just can't even stand here and talk about that. It would just take too long. And Brian, you've just been amazing, just amazing for the board and for the whole community. And I really want to thank you for your service. So thank you all so much. Oh, and Urim. Urim, I remember the comment that I made, and you're right. It brought tears to both of us. And Missy, I think you're an outstanding president, and I just wish you the very best all the time. Oh, did I cover it? No, Tammy. Tammy and Nancy, you all have just been super and a big, big, big help. And David, well, I don't need to say much because we know. Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
With us tonight also is the Head Start Policy Council. Would you please stand for recognition? So this council is instrumental in the continued excellence of our Plano ISD Head Start program. We as a board thank you for your commitment and your service. And thank you, Tina, for working so closely with the Head Start Council. Anyone have any comments about Head Start? Okay. Next item on our agenda is the canvassing of election results. We will begin the canvass of the trustee election that took place on May 6, 2017. At this point, I'd like to ask trustees David Stolley and Dr. Yoram Solomon to join Gloria Ann Fernandez of our communications department to canvass the trustee elections. So at this point, gentlemen, you can exit behind here, and Gloria Ann will take you to the back room and she'll share the results with you, and we will basically wait for their conclusion, and then we'll take action when they return.
We're going to count them one by
Yeah, we
one.
don't have any music. We don't have any jokes. So you can talk amongst yourselves at this point.
No, actually, by the end of the summer, with this courses he's taking several of the season, so we'll get to other exams and everything. When are you doing study? Basically, the first part of Will the chairperson of the canvassing committee please address the board with the trustee election returns?
Madam President, fellow trustees, as chairman of the canvassing committee, I declare the results of the May 6, 2017 Plano ISD School Trustee General Election to be correct and move that the canvassing of the returns and the order declaring the results of the election be approved and passed. I will read the results now. The total number of votes cast, 29,250. Each of the candidates in the election received the following votes. Place 1, Tammy Richards, 15,581. Carissa Picard, 6,872. The elected trustee is Ms. Tammy Richards. Place 2, Jack Liu with 3,605, Angela Powell with 7,605, Sridhar Sri Yadavali, 4,571, and Amanda Jackson, 7,178. The elected trustee is Angela Powell. In place 3, Nancy Humphrey with 11,018 votes, Yvette Jackson with 2,538, Nathan Rylander with 7,905. And the elected trustee is Miss Nancy Humphrey. And in place 6, Marilyn Hinton with 5,601. Greg Meyer with 10,485. And Trish Patterson with 5,167, making the elected trustee Greg Meyer. And I have made the motion.
Do we have a second to the motion to approve the canvassing of returns and the order declaring the results of the trustee election as presented by the canvassing committee?
Second.
All those in favor, please raise your hand. Motion passes unanimously. Okay, this is the fun part. So,
This was fun.
this is the funner part then. All right, at this point in time, we're going to go through the oath of office. So Denise Gillespie, our assistant, will come down here and you will, when we call you, administer the oath of office, and she will guide you through the instructions of that process. Once that has occurred, then you can join us up here at the appropriate spot at the board table. So at this time, I call on Denise Gillespie.
Yes, Tammy Richards, if you'd like to come down, Ms. Richards. Thank you. If you will read the, place your right hand on the Bible. Raise your right hand. And read the statement of office.
Okay. I, Tammy Richards, do solemnly swear that I have not directly or indirectly paid, offered, promised to pay, contributed, or promised to contribute any money or thing of value, or promised any public office or employment for the giving or withholding of a vote at the election at which I was elected, or as a reward to secure my appointment or confirmation, whichever the case may be, so help me God.
And if you read the oath of office, please.
I, Tammy Richards, do solemnly swear that I will faithfully execute the duties of the office of Plano ISD School Board Trustee of the state of Texas, and I will, to the best of my ability, preserve, protect, and defend the Constitution and the laws of the United States and of this state, so help me God.
And I need you to stand. Thank you very much.
I'd like to take a moment of personal privilege. This is the last time that I will serve as a trustee. I have 4 more years to do important things like early childhood, helping our low-performing elementary schools, continuing Marilyn's work in character education. So I want to say a few thanks. I want to thank my wonderful friends who've been through this the last 7 years. You can't do this by yourself. I want to thank my family. Y'all come up here. I want to thank my husband Mike for his unwavering support, and he's the best sign guy in the business. I want to thank my daughter who couldn't be here tonight, Juliet, on a business trip, and I want to thank my son Mark. When I was first elected, Julia was being inducted into the National Honor Society. So, as typical of school board families, we were having to divide and conquer. And so, Mike and Julia went to this induction for NHS, and Mark came to me. He was my family member here. Mark was only 13 when I was first elected, and of all the family members, he has sacrificed the most. I'm not much of a cook, but it got even worse. So there were a lot of full hen sandwiches, dinners. Fortunately, he turned 16, he could at least go to Chick-fil-A. So I thank you, Mark, for your sacrifice.
I call Angela Powell. Miss Powell, if you please come to the podium. Miss Powell, you raise your right hand and place your left hand read a statement of officer.
I, Angela Powell, do solemnly swear that I have not directly or indirectly paid, offered, promised to pay, contribute, or promised to contribute any money or thing of value, or promised any public office or employment for the giving or withholding of a vote at the election at which I was elected, or as a reward to secure my appointment or confirmation, whichever the case may be, so help me God.
And if you'll read the oath of office, please.
In the name and by the authority of the state of Texas, I, Angela Powell, do solemnly swear that I will faithfully execute the duties of the office of Plano ISD School Board Trustee of the state of Texas, and with the best of my ability preserve, protect, and defend the Constitution and laws of the United States and of this state, so help me God.
Congratulations.
My number one supporter, my husband, and these kids, and then my friends, Beverly Bruce, Jim Polly, my treasurer, my Jason, Connor Manning, Anthony Shelley, Bruce Smith. Thank you so much. And everyone in East Plano, everybody, I just love you. I love everybody in the whole family. Murphy and
Parker.
City of Parker.
And Richardson and Dallas.
Richardson and Ellen.
And Alan.
They're all part of Dallas.
And Lucas.
Not Houston.
I ask Nancy Humphrey. Ms. Humphrey, if you'll please come to the podium. Raise your right hand, place your left hand on the Bible,
Okay.
and read the statement of officer, please, William.
All right. I, Nancy Humphrey, do solemnly swear that I have not directly or indirectly paid, offered, promised to pay, contributed, or promised to contribute any money or thing of value, or promised any public office or employment for the giving or withholding of a vote at the election at which I was elected, or as a reward to secure my appointment or confirmation, whichever the case may be, so help me God.
And if you'll please read the oath of office.
In the name and by the authority of the state of Texas, I, Nancy Humphrey, do solemnly swear that I will faithfully execute the duties of the office of the Plano ISD School Board Trustee of the state of Texas, and will, to the best of my ability, preserve, protect, and defend the Constitution and laws of the United States and of this state, so help me God.
Congratulations.
Thank you. All right.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you. Can I ask my family to join me up here as well? Okay, it doesn't happen without, I'm sorry, the best sign guy. It's debatable. Whoa. Okay, it's a tie. But, you know, my husband and family have put up with my absence and they've sacrificed in my absence and gone without a meal or two or ate a lot of Chick-fil-A. And I wish my son could be here. He was here with me last week. He flew up from college to campaign and sit at the polls, thank you, with me. And of course, my daughter was away studying and she couldn't be there, but she's here now. So this is Caroline Humphrey. Spencer Humphrey is my son, and my husband is Jim Humphrey. And thank you so much. And I have some friends here with me tonight who I couldn't do this without. And I have to also say thank you to Camille Essery, who is my treasurer. So, thank you.
Thank you, Nancy. I ask Greg Meyer, please come to the podium.
Sorry, this is
And if you will raise your right hand, put your left hand on the Bible, please, sir, and read the statement of office.
I, Greg Meyer, do solemnly swear that I have not directly or indirectly paid, offered, promised to pay, contributed, or promised to contribute any money or thing of value, or promised any public office or employment for the giving or withholding of a vote at the election at which I was elected, or as a reward to secure my appointment or confirmation, whichever the case may be, so help me God.
And if you'll read the oath of office, please, sir.
In the name and by the authority of the state of Texas, I, Greg Meyer, do solemnly swear that I will faithfully execute the duties of the office of Plano ISD Board Trustee of the state of Texas, and will, to the best of my ability, preserve, protect, and defend the Constitution and laws of the United States and of this state, so help me God.
Congratulations. And if I could get you to sign. Yes. Yes. And one more. Just the oath of office. Thank you. And you can take your place at the desk. Yes, yes.
So if I took a moment to thank everyone, I really should be here until Thursday. But I just briefly want to thank my fabulous friends who helped, Mike and Teresa Bronski, who are here today, so thank you for all their help. This is like to get back to this. Robin went to Rose for the years that I've been some of my real close as well, really helped me out. And then my family, my wife is on a business trip and is very angry she couldn't be here today. I'll be with that for a while, but to my great kids and my wife, thank you so much, and I love you.
We'll let your family get pictures as you get seated, and then we'll get started again.
Very good.
Okay. So apologies to Anne for the date conflict. So welcome. And now we proceed with our regular business. At this time, I will turn over the election of officers of the Plano ISD Board of Trustees to Superintendent Brian Bingley, who will preside over the election of the office of President.
Oh, okay. All right. According to board policies, BDAA legal and local, and board operating procedures, I was duly notified by each member of the board wishing to serve as officers. The deadline for notifying me of their intent and interest was Friday, May 12th by 6:00 p.m. The nomination process for board officers formally closed on Friday, May the 12th. For the officer positions, I have received 3 notifications of interest from the following trustees. I will list them in the order the notifications were received by date, time, stamp. On May 8th, 2017 at 8:50 a.m., Missy Bender stated her intent to seek election for the office of President. On May 8th, 2017 at 2:12 p.m., Nancy Humphrey stated her intent to seek election for the office of Secretary. On May 8th, 2017 at 12:13 p.m., David Stolley stated his intent to seek election for the office of Vice President. With that, I now call for a motion for the nomination for the office of President.
I move that we approve the nomination for Missy Bender for President.
Second.
Do you have a second to that motion?
Second.
Dr. Solomon? The nominee for president is Missy Bender. All those in favor of Missy Bender for president, please raise your right hand. Okay.
Can't be any hand.
With that, I now call for another motion for the nomination Oh, no, we don't need that.
I take
With,
over now.
yeah, with 7 votes, I declare Missy Bender as president. I now defer the elections for vice president and secretary to President Ms. Bender per policies, BDAA legal and local, and the board operating procedures for the elections of officers, and I'm glad to do so.
Thank you, Dr. Bingley, and thank you, colleagues. I now call for a motion for the nomination to be considered by the trustees for vice president.
I motion that David Stolley be nominated for the position of Vice President.
And do I have a second?
I'll second that motion.
All in favor, please raise your hand. Motion passes unanimously. I now call for a motion for the nomination by the trustees for the position of secretary.
I nominate Nancy Humphrey. I motion that we nominate Nancy Humphrey for the position of Secretary.
And do I have a second?
Second.
All in favor, please raise your hand. Motion passes unanimously. Congratulations. So that was easy. We now move to the next item on our agenda, and that is the designation of signatories. Typically, the board authorizes the president and the secretary of the board to be the official signatories of the district, with the vice president being authorized as the alternate signature. Additionally, the board will designate the superintendent or interim deputy superintendent as the board designees to sign off on legal documents. The board will also authorize the chief financial officer or executive director of financial services as the designees to certify federal fiscal reports requesting payments. And the board must authorize the district to continue to use the present check signing plate until a new one can be secured following the election of officers. Checks are signed by the president and the secretary of the board. Do I have a motion to authorize the president and secretary of the board to be the official signatories of the district?
So moved.
Do I have a second?
Second.
All in favor, please raise your hand. Motion passes. Do I have a motion to designate the interim or deputy interim superintendent as the board designees to sign off on legal documents?
So moved.
A second.
Who got the motion?
We'll give that to Nancy.
Okay. And I'll second.
Okay. All in favor, please raise your hand. Motion passes.
You need to do it faster. I'm not in practice.
There's a lot of competition for motioning, so you gotta jump up.
I'll work on it.
Do I have a motion to authorize the chief financial officer or executive director of financial services as the designees to certify federal fiscal reports requesting payments?
So moved.
Do I have a second?
Second.
Okay, all in favor, please raise your hand. Motion passes. And do I have a motion to authorize the district to continue using the present check signing plate until a new one can be secured following the election of officers?
So moved.
Do I have a second?
Second.
All in favor, please raise your hand. Motion passes. All right, very good. Next item on our agenda is determine the dates and times for our regular monthly meetings. You've seen the schedule in your packet. I will ask for a motion to consider approval.
I so move.
Do I have a second?
I second.
Okay. I'm just going to have a little discussion on this before we vote, just to point out that typically, we have them on the 1st and 3rd, but sometimes there are like holiday time periods and so forth where we only have one. So we moved the calendar so that we don't have 2 meetings back to back, one week after another. So it should be always a week in between. That's reflected in the calendar. So it's not always 1st and 3rd for that reason. Okay? All in favor, please raise your hand. Motion passes. Okay, now we are going to consider appointments of the school attorney, medical officer, advisors, auditors, and demographer. First of all, do I have a motion to approve the appointment of the school attorney?
So moved.
Do I have a second?
Second.
All in favor, please raise your hand. Motion passes. Do I have a motion to approve the appointment of the medical officer?
So moved.
And do I have a second?
Second.
All in favor, please raise your hand. Motion passes. All of these identities are contained within your agenda packet, of course. Do I have a motion to approve the appointment of our advisors?
So moved.
Second?
I second.
All in favor, please raise your hand. Motion passes. Do I have a motion to approve the appointment of auditors?
So moved.
Do I have a second?
Second.
All in favor, please raise your hand. Motion passes. Do I have a motion to approve the appointment of the demographer?
So moved.
Do I have a second?
Second.
All in favor, please raise your hand. Motion passes. Thank you. Okay, that part's over. That's a once-a-year occurrence where we go through all that. We will now move to the regular public comment portion of our agenda. For the public comment portion, the board has public comment cards that are accepted from 6 to 7 p.m. Cards are not accepted after 7 p.m. and are not transferable to other parties or speakers. All cards will be collected and given to Carla Oliver or a representative of the Communications Department who will present the speakers during this time. Ms. Oliver, do we have any speakers for public comment?
We did not receive any cards.
All right, thank you. All right, the next item that we will consider is the consent agenda, which includes personnel recommendations, minutes of previous meetings, bids, purchases, and construction items. Are there any requests to remove an item or items from the consent agenda for further discussion?
I'd like to ask removal of item B, the minutes of previous meetings, for a separate vote.
Okay, thank you. We will move that to items for discussion and action, which I believe is item 10B. D, pardon me, thank you. All right, so do I have a motion to consider the agenda as presented, minus the one exception for board approval?
I
So
move
moved.
we approve the consent agenda except for that one item that'll be at 10D.
Do I have a second?
Second.
All in favor, please raise your hand. Motion passes. All right, now the board will continue with agenda items for discussion and action. We will begin with agenda item A. This is related to termination of a Chapter 21 probationary contract employee. Dr. Gutierrez will introduce the discussion on this item.
Good evening, members of the board. We do have a recommendation for a termination of a probationary contract for one employee.
I'm sorry, Dr. Gutierrez. I omitted an important, very important part of the script, and I need to go back for just a minute. We'd like to introduce some new administrative appointments. So forgive me for jumping ahead. Dr. Bingley, with the consent agenda approval, we have some new administrative appointments. Mr. Fortenberry, would you like to go first?
Thank you, and I'm sure John Orr is very relieved since he thought he was going to be announced that he's not being terminated. So it all worked out very well. You just approved the hiring of John Orr as our Director of Purchasing. John, would you stand up? And don't see any family or friends. Okay. I know you have family and friends. John has been our coordinator in the purchasing department since 2013. He had previously worked in Duncanville, Grand Prairie, and Highland Park, and had also, for about 3 years, worked with the Region 10 Educational Service Center. So very glad we got John here back in 2013, and very glad that he's going to be filling the role that is soon to be vacated by Raymond Weaver, who's retiring after 21 years in the district. Most of that is Director of Purchasing. Ray's leaving it in good hands, but Ray, you'll be greatly missed. And I'd like Ray to stand up just so we can express our appreciation to you, Ray. Thank you.
Yeah, we'd like to ask if Susan Modisette could introduce a new administrative appointment, please.
I'd be happy to. Thank you, Dr. Bingley. It's my pleasure to reintroduce David Jones, who will be promoted to assistant principal at Shepton High School. And David is here with the cutest family in America. If y'all would stand, his wife Ashley, his son Garrett, his daughter Lila Mae, and Clara. Welcome. And also, David's joined by his principal, Jeff Banner. Congratulations.
Before everyone leaves for bedtime, I certainly want to say thank you for both of you for stepping up in bigger roles in PISD, and for those who came to join them this evening, we thank you for that, and more than that, for the ongoing love and patience that it takes for all of us to do this work. So thank you for what you're going to do for the organization for ultimately 55,000 children.
Congratulations to both of you. Now, returning back to item 10A, Dr. Gutierrez, thank you.
So we'll start over again. The administration is recommending the termination of a Chapter 21 probationary contract employee.
Do I have a motion to approve as presented?
So moved.
Do I have a second?
I second.
All in favor, please raise your hand. Motion passes. Item B is related to the approval of the employee compensation package for 2017-18. This was discussed previously at the March 14 and May 2nd board meetings. Dr. Gutierrez will introduce any further discussion. Dr. Gutierrez.
Yes, as President Bender has shared, there's been extensive discussion since this the presentation of our compensation package was presented back in March, and the administration is recommending a 3% salary increase across the board to our employees. In addition to the 3% salary increase, we are also recommending an increase to the district contribution for employee health insurance, which currently stands at $259, and increasing that to $279 a month. And just a little bit of background information, in the past few weeks, TASB has conducted a survey of school districts throughout the state, in which about 76 of those respondents indicated that they were going to give a salary increase for the upcoming school year. Of those respondents, 28% indicated that they were going to be giving a 3% or higher pay increase, and about 70% of school districts were doing 2% or more. And so we felt really strongly, and in consultation with the Business Services Office, Steve Fortenberry, our CFO, we feel comfortable recommending a 3% salary increase.
Do I have a motion to approve the recommendation for the employee compensation package as presented?
I move that we approve the compensation plan document that is that Dr. Gutierrez just described, with the 3% raise and the increase to the direct contribution for employee health insurance to $279 per month.
And do we have a second?
I second the motion.
All in favor, please raise your hand.
I'd like to comment before we vote.
Okay, discussion.
Yeah. So we have this conversation every year about the employee health, and I'm supporting this move from 259 to 279. But I do want to be mindful that we're not helping all of our employees with this. I understand the rationale and the reasoning, we've discussed it, but in future conversations about this, I'd like for us all to be mindful of that we want to do what's best to help as many of all of our employees, and that's better suited in using a finite amount of dollars, in my opinion, in salary as opposed to benefits. That said, I am going to support this as presented.
Any other discussion? All right. All in favor, please raise your hand. Motion passes.
Just before we move on, I certainly want to thank the board for this commitment to our employees who make us great. So thank you very much on their behalf.
Thank you. At this time, I'm going to turn over the management of the meeting to Vice President Nancy Humphrey. This is graduation time. I have a graduating senior, And our schools have special recognition events, and my daughter's recognition event is happening in 30 minutes. So there are some things where you just have to say family comes first, and this is one of those occasions. So the board knows that I've arranged this with them previously. So at this point in time, I'm going to turn the management of the meeting over to current Vice President Nancy Humphrey, because the new officers will take their spots upon graduation. That's when we will do that. So I will exit and allow you to please continue. And Nancy, I will hand this script to you. Thank you very much.
All righty. Have a good evening, Missy. Take care.
All right, we'll move to item 10C, which is to authorize the advertisement of notice of public meeting to discuss the budget and tax rate. Excuse me, the board will discuss authorizing the advertisement of the notice of public meeting to discuss the budget and tax rate. Mr. Fortenberry will introduce this discussion. Mr. Fortenberry?
Thank you, Ms. Humphrey. And as we're waiting for the PowerPoint, there it is.
Magic.
A few introductory comments. The state law requires that you as a board conduct a public meeting to discuss the budget and proposed tax rate prior to adopting either. It also requires that you publish a notice of that meeting in no less than 10 days and no more than 30 days prior to the meeting. It's not required by law, but as a best practice, historically, Plano ISD has asked the board to authorize that advertisement prior to it being published. That way there's no surprise when we get to the public meeting. So tonight I'd like to briefly call your attention to some of the highlights of the notice. The actual notice is a 2-page document that's prescribed by law that's in your packet. So some of the items on there that I'll cover, it does indicate the current and proposed tax rates, and we are proposing at this point, although you won't adopt, I have to remind you, you won't adopt the tax rate until September after we get the certified tax roll, but the numbers that'll be in the proposed column are the same as this year's actual tax rate. If you were to adopt a rate higher than that, you'd have to have another public hearing. You could lower the rates when you adopt them and not be required to have a second public hearing. The INS rate is tentative at the same rate. We'll have some discussion on June the 6th about the sizing of our bond sale this summer, which could have some impact on that tax rate. Also, when we get to certified values, they could have an impact on that. The M&O rate, I'd like to say is tentative. It would be great if we could lower that. We were hoping that House Bill 486 would pass. That would allow us, if we drop that, to not have to go through another TRE if we need to increase it again. It appears that House Bill 486 died a cruel death today. We'll discuss that, I guess, more during the legislative update. So it looks like the $1.17 is probably going to be the M&O rate. The problem with lowering it is that the following year we'll see our recapture payment go up by another $40 to $45 million. And if we were unable to get back to the $1.17, we'd have difficulty making that payment that the state charges us for. So again, if you can't adopt a rate higher than what we publish without holding another public hearing, but we might possibly adopt a lower rate, particularly on the INS side. We also have a somewhat confusing section. Again, we don't make it confusing. It's dictated by the state exactly how this is worded. The notice will actually show 4 rates. It will show last year's rate, which we just went to, is a total of $1.439. The next item I've highlighted is called the rate to maintain the same level of revenue and pay debt. And it's calculated on a per student basis, and it factors in the recapture payment. The thing I'd call your attention to here, just to maintain the same level of revenue per student after paying recapture, Our M&O rate would need to be almost $1.20, but by law, we cannot even levy $1.20. The highest that we could levy is $1.17. Counties and cities sometimes pat themselves on the back for adopting what they call the effective tax rate, which generally at least gives them the advantage of taxes on new property that's been added during the year, new construction. We can't even do that. We can't get to the rate that would generate the same amount for students we had this past year. So that's important to understand. The rollback rate is the same as the proposed rate. That's $1.17 with 26.9 cents, which could drop again.
So can I ask you again a question about that slide? Do you mind going back?
Sure.
The rate to maintain the same level of revenue and to pay the INS payments. The M&O rate would be almost $1.20. With the growth in property values that we've received, that we've seen in the district this year of, say, 8%, is that right?
I think it's a little below. It's
Close to 8.
Yes.
So even with the growth in values, we would have to raise more, if we could raise the rate, which we know by law we can't go beyond the $1.17, but we would need to raise almost $1.20 on that increased property base in order to make the same revenue that we received in this past year.
That's correct. At the meeting on May 2nd, 2 weeks ago, when we went through the revenue comparison, you might recall one of the slides there showed that our local revenue was increasing a little over $41 million because of the increase in the tax base, but our recapture payment was going up $46 million. And then what little amount of state revenue we get was actually dropping by $3.8 million. So the net of all that is that we actually, even with the same tax rate and with all the property value growth, we actually have $8.4 million less to work with next year than this current year.
And that's primarily because our recapture rate is going from $104.6 million to $150.6 million, or a $46 million increase in 1 year.
Absolutely, that's the reason.
Okay. I just want to make sure that anyone who's on a neighborhood app or Facebook or anything that's talking about school property taxes, they need to understand the component that goes into recapture, which is an item of expenditure from our revenues that has no discretion in the local district. It's all sent to the state for their discretionary use.
This slide shows our property tax rate since 2006. The reason we used 2006, that was pretty much, well, I don't know if it was the peak, but it was the year that the state used the franchise taxes they used to collect to buy down the property taxes that we used to collect. And then, of course, they reduced the franchise taxes. But our M&O rate at that time was $1.50, and it had dropped to $1.04. So you see the first couple of years, a pretty sharp decline, then a gradual increase, I guess, through 2013. In 2014, we had our tax ratification election, our TRE, where we raised the M&O rate to $1.17. Since then, it's declined slightly as we've been able to reduce the INS rate about another 1.5 cents. If we adopt the same rate for 2017-18, it will be the third straight year of that rate, which is down a little from the 2 years previous.
And so I would like to also add that I believe that we were able to reduce our INS rate because of the refunding of debt and the aggressive amortization that we've taken for buildings. Is that correct?
Yes, when we had the TRE, we restructured some debt for 2 years and brought the INS rate down by about 5 cents.
That's right.
But since that time, because of the value growth, and that's primarily been the factor in allowing us to drop that rate. We did save a little over a year ago. We refinanced. It was $330 million of debt, and actually saved the taxpayers about $78 million. but it didn't drive down the rate. What we did with that was we lopped off the last 2.5 years. Sorry, I think it was 4.5 years of payments. We put all the savings out on the end so we could continue to pay the principal down more quickly. This shows you what our values doing this year. The total appraised value of all property in the district is going from $53.6 billion to $56.8 billion. After you take out all of the exemptions, the net taxable value growth is from 45.8 to 49.5, which is about an 8% growth. In total dollars, that's a $3.7 billion increase. $1.2 billion of that is new construction, which leaves $2.5 billion for inflation or increases in existing properties. So our new construction figure is probably one of the highest we've had with primarily commercial construction.
Steve, the numbers for the current tax year, they are before, I know that people are going to oppose the tax rate that they got, or the assessed value that they have. So this is before.
This is actually.
So this is still going to change.
It will change, but this is actually the appraisal district's certified estimate of what that number will be after the appeals. The last 3 or 4 years, he's been low by that 1 to 1.5%. So actually, that figure will probably go up a little bit if history repeats itself. So he has to give us a certified estimate, which I think is an oxymoron. It's a certified estimate, but he does that based on what he thinks will be lost through the appeal process.
He hasn't seen my appeal yet.
That's right. And I think there's probably, obviously, as prices continue to skyrocket, there's probably a lot more protests year after year than in previous years. He showed us some data on that recently. Taxes on the average residence. This is in total. This year looks like an increase of about $289. I'll show you something very interesting about that in the next slide, though.
Is this just the PISD part?
Yes. Yeah, probably should have made that clear in the heading. This is just the Plano ISD portion.
And that average residence value is $318,000?
That's the estimated average taxable value after exemptions. I think the average actual value is $356,000.
Okay.
$356,000. So you can see that, again, in 2006, it was at $3,900. We never, after the tax rate compression from the state, we never got back to that figure for 11 years. We didn't get above the $3,919 until 2017. But the last 3 years in particular, we've seen some pretty healthy increases in the taxes on an average home. I think this next slide, this information is not in the tax, or in that notice that will be published, but this board this spring has made a great effort at transparency and to let the taxpayers know where their money is really going. I think this slide is very, very important particularly for a homeowner to look at. So this tracks since 2014, which was the first year that our TRE was in place. It shows the total, but it also breaks it out between the portion that we retain and the amount that we have to forward to the state for recapture. So just the visual of that slide, you can see that the portion we retain has grown a little bit, but nothing like the recapture portion that the state takes away from us. In fact, I said a moment ago that the increase in the taxes on the average residence was going up by $289. Well, $296 of that $289 is going to the state. So the portion that we retain locally is actually dropping by about $7 next year. So that's a tough thing to explain to folks, and I get the privilege of doing that every fall when they get their tax bills. Kind of just go up, what are you doing with the money? And the answer is we're sending it to Austin because nothing seems to be done about recapture.
So in 2018, that red portion represents 22%.
Right.
Okay. And in 2014, that red portion represented 6%.
5 or 6%.
So would that difference between the 5% or the 6% in 2014 and the 2018 amount be a silent tax increase on our taxpayers?
Oh, absolutely. I think it is. Because the tax bill doesn't show them where it's going. It shows it's going to Plano ISD.
Yeah.
So with all that good news, the next steps after tonight, June 6th, we'll have the budget hearing, budget and tax rate hearing, and then ask you to adopt the budget. We'll get the certified values from the appraisal district on or around July 25th. We should have our summer bond issuance sometime in August, either at the August 8th or 22nd meeting. And then at the September 5th meeting, we'll ask you to adopt the tax rate. What we do need you to do tonight is authorize administration to advertise the notice for the public meeting to discuss the budget and proposed tax rate. And that meeting will be held on June 6th at 7:00 p.m. as part of our regular board meeting.
Okay, believe it or not, I have one more question. I'm sorry.
All right.
I don't know if you have the notice for public meeting in that presentation. Is that in our?
The notice was in the actual notice itself is a 2-page document that is in your.
Okay, but we don't have it for that.
No, I don't.
The question I have is on page 1, where we have comparison of proposed budget with last year's budget, and on the maintenance and operations. We're required to disclose this, but what I have a question about is on the maintenance and operations, it says 5.9% increase. Does that include or exclude the recapture payment?
That 5.9% includes the recapture increase. In fact, Linda calculated it with and without. We have to publish it with, which shows, again, I think of misleading information. Is a 5.9% increase. If you took recapture out of both years, it's actually a 2.1% decrease.
Okay,
So we went from a 5.9% increase to a 2.1% decrease if we excluded recapture.
so that would be overall an 8% decrease in our M&O operations if you add those two together, because to get to a negative 2%.
Right. The recapture, the increase alone in the recapture is about an 8% of our total budget.
Okay, so if there was a place to if this notice gave us an opportunity to disclose what's truly happening here in Plano ISD, there would be a recapture percentage there of about 8% increase.
Yes.
Okay, I just want to make that clear.
Yeah, this is appraisal contest season right now, and there's a lot of people in our community who spend a lot of time and effort to get their appraisals contested to save a few $100 or $100 on their taxes, and that's chump change, honestly, to what is happening, the way this money is being spent, and the money that we're sitting in for recapture, and that's where the tax burden really lies. And we could, I'd love for people to have the same vigor in challenging their state representatives to change this as they do in challenging the appraisal on their homes.
If I could just add, Mr. Fortenberry, thank you for this presentation. I think it does a tremendous job of explaining the reason behind this. I mean, because what we as a body have to recognize, and what I hope the audience recognizes, is that we are, if we adopt the proposed rate, we are raising taxes. And that pains me as a taxpayer, I assure you. But I think, the slide you showed a couple back, with the blue and the red chart there, really explains, what we have to do with, 22 cents of every dollar we collect. Thank you, that's the one. I mean, that's a tremendous slide. So I appreciate your efforts there, and that'll help us, I think, understand it so that we can then explain it when we get the comments on Facebook and next door and
Right.
phone calls and things like that. So definitely thank you for that, Mr. Fortenberry.
Sure.
Well, I think you're saying that revenues have gone up, but a larger percentage is going back for recapture. Is there any other discussion? All right, I will call for a motion. Do I have a motion to approve to authorize the advertisement of notice of public meeting to discuss the budget and tax rate?
So moved.
Do we have a second?
Second.
Is there any discussion, any further discussion now that the motion's on the table? All right, I'll call for a vote. All those in favor, please raise your hand. All right, and the motion carries. Thank you, Mr. Fortenberry. All right, we will now move to the reports section of the agenda, which is item 11. And item 11A, I'm waiting for you to, do you need a minute? Oh, to get the, okay. Item 11A is the Career and Technical Education Board.
Nancy, first we have item 10D, which is the approval of minutes of previous meeting.
I totally forgot that, and it's written right here, my mistake. Okay, let me go back to that. That was an add-on here. Earlier, we pulled item, which item was it on the consent agenda? It was regarding minutes of previous meetings. And it made more sense for us to pull that as a separate vote because there were some new board members on the board that weren't here when those meetings were written. So I now am asking for a motion to approve the minutes of previous meetings, which we're right now in item 10D, and it was in item consent agenda B. Do I have a motion?
I'm so moved. I move to approve the meetings. I'm trying to count. We only have three.
Say it again.
We have three trustees that can vote for it.
I'm planning to abstain, so I can't.
That would be okay.
Yeah.
Do we need majority of the board?
Oh, I didn't realize David had stepped out. You're right. We don't have a quorum with. We can come back to this.
Actually, I take it back. We do have a quorum. We do have 5 sitting trustees right now. We will not have majority of the board, but we'll have majority of the quorum. And I don't think that you need majority of the board.
I don't know, but I don't mind waiting. The door. What?
I hear the door.
There we go. We'll just wait for David.
Jeez.
Well, you know what? We now have 4 board members that can vote on the approval of the previous minutes. And so I was calling for a motion
Next
to
time, yes,
approve the minutes of previous meetings.
So moved.
Second.
All right. There's a motion on the table. Any discussion?
I'll just state that this was done so that they can vote on the rest of the consent agenda because they have to abstain. They weren't here for those meetings.
All right. All those in favor, please raise your hand. All those that may vote. All right, the motion carries. Thank you for reminding me about item.
Let just the record reflect that the 2 new trustees have abstained.
Okay. All right. My mistake on missing that. Now we will move to the reports section. And Dr. Jim Musso will introduce the Career and Technical Education Board Advisory Committee report. Dr. Musso.
Thank you, Ms. Humphrey. It's a pleasure to welcome David Hitt, the Director of Career and Technical Education, to the podium to deliver the Advisory Committee report.
Thanks, Dr. Russo. I'm excited to share the progress of this year's CTE Advisory Committee toward the board's directed goals. And there's a lot to share, but I'm going to hijack my own presentation here to start with. We just had a group come back from Orlando at the National Business Professionals of America competition this weekend, and we had 2 first place. Brandon Chen from Jasper, sophomore, first place in the nation in personal financial management. That's pretty awesome. And then we also had first place in legal office procedures by Karen Chin from Plano Senior High. So it was really an opportunity to kind of shout out for that accomplishment. You'll see it in your board update later this week. So I've got a lot to share, so let's jump right in. The restatement of the goals that the board provided us this year continue to define the demand for vocational certifications needed in our local area based on our market data for our area, and then supporting the existing programs, the planned programs, and the board's high school academy development guidelines work that's been going on since as well. And then goal 2, to identify potential business and educational partners that work together to create new learning opportunities for students, tied to that goal 1. And then goal 3 was to identify opportunities for our students to study and or practice the discipline of entrepreneurship, which I can now spell backwards and forwards, and identify community partners to help achieve this goal. So two parts to that. So if we take a look at the first goal, first of all, multiple sources were used to analyze and present this data so we could share the results and progress. So on goal 1 and 2, and those entities were the Texas Workforce Commission, the Bureau of Labor Statistics from the Department of Labor, the U.S., and then Interlink, North Texas Commission, and also some data that we were able to get from Collin College from the recent research and data that they did on similar projects prior to their bond initiative of recent. And kind of the method that we took was, there are 2 lists right now. There's the list that's federal, that's tied to our federal grant, the Perkins Grant for CTE. And so there's a list of certifications that are tracked. So those are obviously ones that are attainable by high school level students if all the right pieces and parts are in place. And then the second one is a newer list. It's one that TEA is working on that's tied to that Domain 4 of post-secondary readiness with the new report card system from TEA. So they began surveying districts and gathering and putting together their own list. And the lists are not identical, but it gave us a starting point. Both obviously are things that are attainable by high school students. So we took that and then we cross-referenced it with our local labor market data so that we could then really zero in on the way the goal was stated on things that were high demand in our local area and both, and possibly attainable by high school students. So that's kind of the way that we went at getting at the data to come and report to you. We'll take a more detailed look in a moment, but these 6 occupational areas surfaced as those with the most demand for industry certifications in our area. And we focused, of course, on the in-demand industry certifications for positions that require less than a bachelor's degree, those attainable by high school level students, like I said earlier, especially if we partnered with a college program. You can reach some of these certifications. And I would point out that, most of these are stackable credentials, and that means that, this might be a way for a student to get a good wage, and even a living wage in many of these. But it's not meaning that it's the end. It would also provide them a starting point to move on to higher ed, 4-year, whatever they're motivated or their employer, whatever their desire is to move on and go as far as they want. A few examples of these in each of these fields here. In healthcare, in the nursing and care specialties, pharmacy techs, medical clerical, health information, medical sonography, sterile processing, dental assistants. Those are all high demand area in our area right now that do have certifications available, attainable for high school students. And then IT, the hot occupations that are tied to again, certifications are cyber and information security, programming, system and network configuration, mobile and cloud-based tech, scripting, database, and data science management. In finance and business, it would be accounting, payroll, data entry processing, financial and insurance processes. It was interesting to find out how many of of those underwriter and life insurance and other types do not require bachelor's degrees, but just require certifications, and then have a good salary with it, a good career. In the advanced manufacturing and engineering technology, precision production machinist, precision welding, electronics technicians, computer-related design, robotics and sensing techs, electronics, petroleum, and chemical applications are all hot areas that, again, have certifications tied to them. And then skilled construction trades, of course, electricians, plumbers, pipe fitters, HVAC, project management, construction supervision, building and environmental systems. And then in the final category there, distribution and logistics. It would be logistics technologies, scheduling, supply chain management, and then transportation planning and routing. So those are some examples. And if we'll take a closer look now at the in your packet, there should be a worksheet. It's titled Local Industry Certifications Review spreadsheet. And let's see if I can pull that up as well on the screen here for you. So it's a lot of data, but it took a lot of data to answer the question, the goal. And so this one kind of ties all of it together, and then you can look at it. And I know you've had a chance to look at it in advance as well. But hopefully it gives detailed answer to a lot of it. One apology already, and I knew the second that we would start listing actual business names in here, that, you know, I view this as an ongoing dynamic document, just like our community. And sure enough, we forgot Carolyn Logus vet practice, her and her husband. But we'll make that remedy as soon as we can. Who? And so just the format of this, if you have any questions, I would highlight the way that it, again, supports the goals, especially when you get to those middle columns there, the Perkins HER report. That means that certification is in that monitored list for our federal grant. And then the second column is that TEA, the one that they're in development on, and we've certainly given our input in 2 different occasions on that. As they build that, it's not certain yet that that's going to be the measurement in Domain 4 for that, but it's highly possible. So that's why we're preparing for that. And then the third column, that's the column that ties into that local labor market data. And so when you see an X in all 3, then for sure it's a hot ticket for us to watch and monitor, and we already have certification programs in place. And that leads me into the next column, supports existing programs. So that's where you'll see if we already have either coursework. If you see a course listed and you do see a value by, that means the number of certifications that students received last year. And if you just see the program, that means it's one that we have the content in the curriculum, but we haven't started that certification yet. Different reasons, teacher credential maybe, or cost, or whatever the case may be, but it's one that's on our radar to start. And then you can see the enrollment numbers. Those are not the numbers of certifications, but those are the actual enrollments in the courses this year that are tied to those certifications. Then moving on to the right, you see the support plan programs, which was the add piece to the goal this year, and the tie-in to both Collins initiatives. Now that the bond has passed, and so they'll move forward likely. And they're telling us it's probably 2019 when they're looking at that project that they're calling their Career and Technical Center for Collin. And then as well as our own work with this secondary advisory committee that we had, and their recommendations earlier this year. So that's the column that will show you the tie-ins to those things. And I think you'll see that there's a lot of similarity in things that have come from that report when you cross-reference it again with what's actually in demand in our area, which was our whole, reason for working on that to begin with. And then finally, as we move to the last couple of slides in the presentation, those tie into the final 2 columns where you see area business, connections that we already know a lot of these businesses, Dr. Bingley's has spoken to and worked with at his CEO breakfasts and different meetings and things throughout the year. So there's already an awareness, and in some cases we already have partnerships, certainly with many of our businesses that help us with internships and job shadowing and clinical rotations and things like that. So that's how you can read into those columns. And like I said, that list will grow. And the final column then is our education connections, our education partners. So if there's not any questions.
Mr.
Yes.
Tim, before you move off that spreadsheet,
yes,
just a comment.
Sure.
This is an area I've been, following during the campaign, even before that. Maybe a bit of an eye chart for those in the audience, but if you look online later at the spreadsheet and you look at CTE current enrollment, I believe it's the 8th or 9th column. I mean, there are hundreds, if not thousands, of our students taking advantage of these programs today, and they're fantastic. I mean, they're really, in my view, helping kids either prepare for the business world or college, really getting them a leg up. And the next column over is where we I guess as a board want to focus on the next couple of years, either independently or with Collin College. And I just think this is fantastic work, and just wanted to say an extra thank you to you for kind of coordinating this for us. Just this is terrific, and I'm excited about it. So thank you.
Good.
David, before you move on,
yes.
2 quick comments. One of them, and I know that if I don't make this comment, Tammy would, as many dual credit courses that our kids can get. I know that one of my daughters, my older daughter now, is going to college, and all of a sudden those things are transfer credits.
Absolutely.
Because you took them, they're college credits. The second comment, one of the certifications, and it didn't occur to me before, but I think is a pretty important one that maybe you should look at, is PMP, Project Management Professional. I think that's a certification that's really helpful. I see a lot of, I get all those unsolicited emails with jobs, a lot of PMP demand.
Okay, thank you. I've seen it come up before. I need to study, find out more about it. Okay, so if we return back. So the third goal, the discipline of entrepreneurship. The discipline of entrepreneurship, or entrepreneurial spirit, or mindset, if you want to call it, I think is a great fit with CTE. Our students, they're innovative, they're willing to try things. They're often described as self-starters or risk takers. The ones in our programs that do have entrepreneurial units or lessons, activities in them already, they're getting taught interpersonal communication skills, effective utilization of resources, how to implement planning process, how to identify opportunities and be persistent at attaining a goal. Those are all things that are very much a part of the entrepreneurial mindset. It's being incorporated into a number of curriculum areas, like I said, or courses. But we want to grow that. We want to do more. We believe that it provides students with the motivation to stay connected to the learning, and while it's preparing them, with hands-on experience needed for employment options and workforce needs. So for this number 3, the advisory committee approached this goal with an intent to seek ways that we could enhance and add to either things we already had or just provide more opportunities for this area for students to learn more about it. And it's more than just how to start a business or own your own business. It's a lot more than that. It's at the heart of, again, the mindset and how can that be. The committee felt that to develop and nurture independence and how to apply those kind of things to everyday problem solving, if you will. So those are big things, but wow, they could help a person through their entire life, regardless of what direction they go. And so I think it's an opportunity for us to get that integrated more into our curriculum and expand it even beyond where we have it already. So the committee felt that a start on that would be to initiate 2 projects, and one addressing each of the 2 parts of the goal. So the first would be building a collection of teaching resources with the intent to provide the CTE teachers and curriculum support staff with resources for sharing with students to study and or practice the discipline of entrepreneurship like it was stated in the goal, and to help develop some new curriculum units that we can see about integrating or adding to other courses. Because again, it's like a basic business course. It ought to be for everyone. It's that, that can be that useful and valuable. So this is just a screenshot, an example of some of these resources. As we've already added some to that. Just this past week, the National Consortium of Entrepreneurship Education, the Network for Teaching Entrepreneurship, those resources, and even some of the talks that come with the TEDx Plano talks. And of course, there are many very, very good TED Talks in general that we've already located to start to build this resource set so that when they start writing curriculum, that'll be done. And we got the help, like I say, of the members of the committee to help us with finding those resources.
I'm glad to see the U.S. Patent Office on there because that's a great resource for our kids.
Yes.
Yeah,
it's listed down. Yeah, we have it. Absolutely. The second project that supports really more of that community partner side, or at least a start at that, is the development and growth of a career speakers list project. And that's to provide campuses with guest speakers, whether it's for their career days or whatever they might call it, or organize that at their campus, and also to even help us with our teachers and content-specific guest speakers. And in fact, I want to thank the members of the board. I think almost all of you helped promote this and start it up. You put it on your Facebook and helped us get the word out, and we immediately got some really high-quality speakers. And I didn't want it to sit for 6 months and then not have contact. So I went ahead and encouraged my group to go ahead and share that with their teachers, and we've already had some go and spend entire days at our schools, and they've got rave reviews of just how great the experience was for their students. So I thank you for that, and especially even Dr. Solomon, thank you for signing up as a speaker yourself. And I know you've done some of that already in some of our schools, but we look forward to even more of that. So thank you for your support on that project and helping us get that kick started. So that being said, the recommendations that the advisory committee would like you to see is to continue to use the data, to guide further research for additional certification opportunities for our students to receive those industry recognized credentials when possible. They felt like that it's important that we provide funding for the student certification exams to help eliminate that particular barrier, because that is a barrier. Some of these certification exams are $20, $30, some are $200. And so we've already started on that this year, and we've found some sources to help out for this school year, but then, like I say, we're continuing to look at that, and we know it's an important element. And because we are able to help, we are going to have some automotive certifications that I'll be able to report to you coming up when we finish those out in the school year. And we're going to have some AutoCAD and Autodesk type Revit, Inventor, for those of you familiar with those technologies in the graphics and design, drafting, engineering world. Those are going to be coming. So we may not have very many this first time, but we're going to have some, and that's a start. So I'm excited about that. The third, to continue identification and relationship building with our businesses and our education partners, so we can continue to grow that and support new ways for our students to connect, because that's what it's really about, is the connection between them and the students. Once you get that happening, a lot of good things go on. And then, of course, like I already mentioned, continue to really develop and nurture our relationship with college and their initiatives and partners, and how they can help us with some of the solutions as well. And then explore options to assist teachers with any training or certifications or licenses that they may need to get before we can be an authorized training center for some of these certifications. So that's, again, another challenge that comes up in part of the things to accomplish and to get past. Then continue the growth of the discipline of entrepreneurship teaching resources project, and again, with the intent that I already stated, so we can provide more opportunities to grow that. Continue development and growth of the career speakers list, and again, this opportunity so these speakers can share real world knowledge and experiences with students. I know, sometimes that's all it takes, that one person or that one TV show or that one movie or whatever to just, wow, this is what I want to try. And so I know that was the way for myself, and many of you maybe can have similar stories. But again, this will be a great way to maybe have some of that happen in our classrooms. And then finally, to seek additional ways, like I mentioned again, for additional students beyond those already taking our current virtual business course, our entrepreneurship course, our career preparation courses that already have entrepreneurial mindset units in them, but a way to go ahead and example, or for example, to explore development of inclusion of an entrepreneurial mindset unit into more CTE subjects. And that's the members of our committee this year. And I would just close in stating that by continuing to improve CTE, we're empowering our students with skills needed to prepare them to be successful in today's workforce and hopefully the one beyond. So thanks again for your support. Any other questions?
I actually have a question. We've got a once-in-a-year opportunity coming up with graduation. As we go through the Advanced Industry Academy, that can be a very expensive proposition. And so I still would like to understand a little bit more of the market demand for some of these courses. Mm-hmm. And so could we think about it at graduation? You could take iPads with a SurveyMonkey quiz on it. I'm sure at the Star there's lots of great Wi-Fi, and ask kids some very simple questions as they're staying in line, because there's a lot of standing and waiting at graduation. So what are they doing next? Is it going to community college, four-year college, military, going straight to work? What's their longer term plan? I'm starting at community college, but I plan to get a four-year degree. And then maybe a question like, what's their quartile in the class? So we can get some sense what the demand really is. Because right now I think we're making a lot of assumptions that I would really like to see supported by a little bit more data about what our own kids really want to do. Because at times I think we make the assumption a kid who may be in the below 50 percentile is not college material. Well, that's actually their dream. Mm-hmm. It's not to go and do something that's more hands-on. So I don't know if that's something that we can mobilize now. Like I said, we've got a once-in-a-year opportunity coming up pretty quickly, and I think with 3 or 4 questions we could get some really good information.
Thanks.
David, you probably don't know that, but I'm pretty passionate about the discipline of entrepreneurship. 2 comments. One is, or actually 3. One of them is, as I was looking through your resources, 2 things that came up. There's a program that came out of that comes out of the Rochester Institute of Technology, and it's called Young Entrepreneurs Academy, YEA. A few years ago, I tried to bring it here to Plano, but it required a lot of coordination, typically with the Chamber of Commerce and maybe even with Collin College. But I think that could be a shrink-wrapped program that you may want to adopt. And I'm not saying you should. Another resource I would strongly recommend is there is a shift in the discipline of entrepreneurship into something, and this becomes a buzzword, design thinking. I don't know if you probably heard of this. It comes from a company in California called IDEO, and I think I said it to you once. Mm-hmm. Yes. Now that I'm thinking about that.
Right. And one of the TED Talks was on that last year.
Yeah. And the last thing is, as you know, if you need anything from me, I used to teach that at UT Dallas. Anything that you need from me, I'll be always happy to advise.
Appreciate it.
So, David, a couple points. One is I appreciate the chart because I'm a visual person, and so I appreciate being able to see all these things. One column that struck me was the support existing programs column, and a comment that you made that perhaps we have some high need, high demand areas that we're not able to service because we don't have somebody certified, an instructor. Two thoughts on that. One is if we can leverage our districts of innovation standing to change that, let's look to ways to do that. And two, if there are areas that are high demand, that what we're seeing here is high demand, that are great opportunities, and we're not able to provide that service because of a lack of a teacher unit, so to speak. Let's analyze this data to determine where those I would say those are critical needs to meet that demand. And so let's make sure we do that. And then kind of relatedly, on your recommendations, on your first set of recommendations, your last 3 points on that page were provide funding for certification exams, work with local businesses and education partners to support the initiative, and then explore options for assisting teachers with certification. I think that's a great opportunity for public-private partnerships, because we certainly have people who are going to utilize these services and businesses. So, partnering up with them to provide scholarships or opportunities to pay for those exams that's a natural blend of a public-private partnership. And then same thing with regard to those certifications. If we do need to have teachers certified in an area, and there are businesses out there who need that, they need the students to come out of that program, then that's another natural partnership to sponsor that certification. So, I think this is, I'm really encouraged by all of this, and especially by the recommendations, and really I'm looking forward to see how this continues to develop.
I echo those comments, especially about the districts of innovation. If we have that flexibility to hire people with the skills, but may not be teacher certified in career and technology, I think we can take advantage of that. One of the things that I heard a presentation last week from the Chamber of Commerce, and Jamie Jolly, who is the president, was talking about what she's hearing from employers, and she says that the students that are coming into the workforce, this is what she's hearing, are not as, they don't have the soft skills that they are expecting. And I think in a previous meeting, maybe not the work of this committee, but you've talked about the workplace competencies. Yeah. And so I would love to see that those are included in this, because I want to let them know that we're working on that. Right. Because those you said it'll help these students lifelong in their career to have these skills.
Exactly.
All right.
That's a good point.
Just ask if I could, Mr. Hitt, first a question and then a statement of appreciation. I know when we had quite a while ago discussed the potential for paying for industry certification, at the time the state had a pool, albeit fairly small, that districts could access if in fact they are paying for industry credential for certain credentials. Is that, that's right? As far as we know, that is still there, and I think that's like a first come, first served basis. I don't want to give anybody a false hope that it's a windfall.
It's not a finite amount. It's in April or May, TEA sends out, we have $200,000, so fill out all these papers, and if you qualify. Yeah. At the end of the year. Right. If you've already paid with grant money or foundation, possibly whatever, then you.
And we have talked about connecting industries in the very way that Mr. Stolle had mentioned. Now, if we do that, though, then can we still access those dollars?
My understanding
it doesn't matter who,
Right.
Okay.
The foundation, we worked with Kristen as soon as she's got the new position. And she's been working on making those exact types of connections that you mentioned. And that David mentioned. So we haven't, gotten anybody yet, but there's been some interest.
And just a statement of appreciation. I know we've been having a lot of this, research and dialogue for quite a while. Thank you to you and Dr. Wusso, and to the folks that you've been working with, to the board for bringing forth that academy. It's been methodical, but behind the scenes, not only connection with higher ed, but also then doing the scheduling work. So when we do have to go to students, it's not guesswork. They would understand what does it look like when you start as a ninth grader and how that would progress and what kind of industry certification you can get and how that connects to the pathways in HB5 and all of those things that really have to be in place before the actual work can begin. So I just want to say a huge statement of appreciation because it's a lot to take in and plan for before the real work starts accelerating. And I just thank you for the research and the work that you've done.
Thank you. Thanks.
All right, thank you so much. It was a great report. All right, we will now move on to item 11B, Special Education Board Advisory Committee Report. And Dr. Russo will introduce the Special Education Board Advisory Committee report. Dr. Russo?
Thank you, Ms. Humphrey. Unfortunately, Christy Duke is ill and not able to be with us this evening. However, we have several members of the senior leadership from special education here, and I think collectively we've elected a very capable pinch hitter to fill in for Christy. So it's my pleasure to welcome Sandy Knight to the podium to deliver the advisory committee report.
Thank you very much. Vice President Humphrey and members of the board, thank you for allowing me to speak with you tonight. Our Special Ed Parent Advisory Committee has met on these dates this year. And the goals that you presented to us were to, first of all, identify outside best practices to develop a list of program recommendations for implementation in the Adult Transition Center and further into work or other educational support programs. And then also the second goal was to seek and evaluate parent input in a process of gauging interest and identifying services, needs for off-site accommodations, and services for students with significant behavioral disorders. All right, so I'll take each of those separately. Of course, that goal number one is very near and dear to my heart. We always want to identify outside best practices to develop a list of program recommendations for implementing in our new Adult Transition Center, which we hope to be opening around August of 2018. And our current Adult Transition Service programs are going to instruct our students in career development, community participation, and independent living skills. We want to increase our students' independence and work towards their post-secondary goals. Our students, every student in our adult transition program at this point has completed their state credits required for a diploma, and we want to keep that type of thing in place. But we know these students, even though they've met graduation requirements, aren't quite ready to go into the world of work or to further their education, and that's why we developed our adult transition services. We have a picture here of many of our students in their work situations this year. The center bottom picture there, of course, is our Project Search intern orientation that occurred in August. So our program, our adult transition program, currently has 5 different locations. We have programs at the 3 senior highs. We have and I'll talk about that one first, I think. We break our students into different groups depending on their abilities. Some of our students are just at the job awareness step, where they're becoming aware that people go to work, that there are opportunities for them after they have finished their public school. Then we have career exploration, and this is when the students participate in different job rotations throughout the year. They sample different jobs so that they can determine what their interests and their preferences and their desires are for employment. And then we have community-based instruction, And that's going to be the students navigate through community, buildings, and utilizing the skills that they've learned in their career exploration, like social skills, money management, working independently or in a group. And they are working in a natural setting, such as a grocery store, restaurant, a bank, or a post office. But while we're working on their career exploration, we're continuing to work on functional academics, and that's going to be things like budgeting, money management, telling time, building resumes, reading recipes, and work on their daily living skills, which are going to be those cooking, laundry, hygiene, dark planning. How do you get from one place to another? So that's kind of our program that we have at our senior high campuses. And then we have our program at Collin College. It's adult transition services at Collin College location. And using Collin College as a home base allows our students to be fully integrated in age-appropriate peers in that community setting. Students are trained to utilize public transportation in order to get to and from school and to various sites throughout the community. Pre-employment training occurs through work-based learning at community businesses. We've used a Medical Center of Plano for several years. Students are actively engaged and participate in meetings and trainings with outside agencies. We're hooked really closely with LifePath and with Texas Workforce Solution and REACH as community services. This is where our students are working on those soft skills you were talking about. This spring, our Collin College group was actually selected as the project for Leadership Plano this spring. Very exciting for us as they're part of the chamber program. Many area businesses have participated and helped come to our students at Collin College. They have participated in mock job interviews, which is a great advantage besides just our teachers doing the mock interviews. They've come as guest speakers, and they've also allowed our students to tour different business facilities. Last week, the Leadership Plano presented they had their culminating luncheon, and so many doors are going to be open to our students. We are so excited about that. We were even featured in Plano Profile for May, which is pretty exciting for us also. We want to increase public awareness for our students that they can be they can have a positive impact on our community. Also, as of last week, we have a new one of our community-based vocational educational sites is going to be Texas Health Presbyterian Hospital of Plano. We're excited; it just keeps expanding. And then we have our Project Search, which we just completed our first year. Thank you for supporting that. This is our program where our students have the 1-year internship. We're at Baylor Scott and White at Plano. The students that are participating in this program are totally immersed in the host business. They work side by side with employees of the business. They're trained to utilize public transportation to get to and from work every day in their program. They are connected with Texas Workforce Solutions and with LifePath, which are going to be their continuing support programs as they exit public school. As of now, 7 of our 12 students who participated in Project Search have paid employment already, and we're not even through with the school year yet. So as we look at our future, we know that we're going to bring these programs, several, at least the senior high programs, together under one roof. The skills that we want to continue to work on are, of course, the self-advocacy, self-determination skills, functioning, independent living skills, vocational training, employment planning, community agency connections. We're going to continue with those. So as a committee this year, first of all, we reviewed the Texas Transition and Employment Guide, which is a guide that was developed in partnership with TEA in Region 11. It is required that every school district in Texas publish that, have that available on their website for parents to be able to find. We've done that, but we felt it was important for the committee to actually look at it and read through it and see what this transition employment guide is. And we also researched several articles that had to do with best transition and employment practices. We know that federal guidelines are going to be changing over the next few years, but we want to keep the focus on the themes of student planning, student development, family involvement, and program structures. It's our goal to keep working in that direction. We also had the opportunity to look at quality indicators. We reviewed quality indicators, and we found that we tried to prioritize, because we need to begin at the base and work and grow that direction. We found that there were several items that many of the committee members and staff members felt were important for us to make sure that we keep in place. And one of those is, that we do want the students to complete their graduation requirements before they begin the program. They need to continue to be assigned to a senior high for PEIMS purposes, but we really think it's a great advantage for them to come into the community and be off that high school campus, so that they, in their minds, they know, I'm not in high school anymore. I don't need to do all the things that high school kids do, or all the activities. Students should not return to their home campus to take courses. They have finished those courses. We need to work towards employment. And students need to be able to self-manage their behavior, and independently or with a little support, and navigate through a variety of environments. And then the program staff needs to collaborate closely with the parents for communication. The parents are going to be the ones responsible for these students once they're no longer in public school. We have to work closely with the parents to make sure everyone's there. It's a smooth transition. All right, and our second goal was to seek and evaluate parent input in a process of gauging interest and identifying service needs for off-site accommodations and services for students with significant behavioral disorders. And we looked at statistics. We know that mental health is a growing concern in society and in public schools. Severe and persistent mental illness is defined as sickness that lasts for at least 88 days a year. Research shows that 1 in 17 people have this type of mental illness. 20% of the population will experience a mental health concern. And in Collin County alone, 30 to 35% of the jail inmates take psychotropic drugs. But Texas ranks 48th in per capita spending on mental health. So in order to address this need, it's believed that we are in need of a Collin County Emotional Health Center. The challenges that people face with mental illness is that they have poor health insurance. The issues can't be solved by a short stay in a clinic. Staff is struggling to address mental health issues in our classrooms today. Parents are crying out for help, and we see these mental health issues growing in our schools. So the challenges can be addressed. Early intervention programs offer us the benefits of recovery is more likely to happen if it's caught early. Recovery increases a student's productivity. Students can achieve a higher education, and less students are sent to county residential centers. So, current progress, we know that the committee has discussed proposed project of the Collin County Student Emotional Health Center through a partnership among neighboring school districts. Dr. Duke shared with me that she is on a committee with other directors in other school districts in our area. They are right now trying to identify appropriate services that our students would need, and then they will take their information back to the superintendent's committee of these same school districts. The committee agreed that a parent and community survey would be appropriate, and that's something we'd like to do in the next year. It should include components seeking general awareness and interest from our community at large, but also seek input about specific needs from families, and whether it's with firsthand experience. We know people who have experienced are going to be able to help us greatly with that. The future recommendations that we want to have are clearly define the elements of processes and procedures for all participating districts. We know when you have several districts working together, that's a challenge, it could be, but everyone sees the need. And we also identify the necessary key features and options and supports made available to students in order to maximize their learning and facilitate successful long-term outcomes. So that concludes my presentation. I want to thank the board for your support this year and for allowing us to work on this and for giving us permission to go forward with our quest. Do you have any questions?
I just have a comment. Sandy, thank you, and I believe that the special education department is doing a really fine job. I want to praise something specifically. I want to praise the community-based instruction at Collin College. I think you're doing a fantastic job there. I met the students there. I met the instructor there, Scott Cummings, and I believe it's fantastic. The students are becoming more independent through that program. I want to say also that I know Beach at Plano personally myself, and the collaboration between Collin College with the BSD and the students are just really emerging to adulthood through that program. Thank you.
It's fantastic. Thank you very much.
So,
appreciate that.
I have a quick question on your recommendation. Your first clearly define the elements of processes, process and procedures for all participating districts. Are you talking about for the Student Emotional Health Center?
Yes.
Okay, so
yes.
I mean that seems to be that is an ambitious goal,
Yes.
and certainly need to explore that. But that's something I would expect to come before the board for a larger discussion before we committed to anything inter-district,
yeah.
correct?
Yes, as you recall, we have had some previous conversation. This is the one that Children's Hospital has been also engaged in some of that conversation about can we collaborate among districts, and so we have had some preliminary conversation about that, but before certainly once that work group kind of comes back to us about the potential, then we'll be reaching back out to the board.
Okay, thanks.
I have one question regarding the survey, the community parent survey.
Yes.
Is that just the Plano ISD community, or is that the multiple districts that you're talking about collaborating with?
Well, we want to collaborate with the districts, but that probably hasn't been developed yet.
Okay, because it's under the current progress. Is that okay?
Yes, and that's something we would want to begin with our own district.
Okay.
And the other districts poll their families and their parents, and then we bring it together, I think, to the table if we can.
Okay, great. Are there any other questions or comments? Thank you so much. That was a
you.
really informative report.
Thank you.
Appreciate you being here.
Appreciate it.
Okay, now we'll move on to item 11C, which is the budget report. Steve Fortenberry, CFO, will introduce the budget report. Mr. Fortenberry?
Thank you, Ms. Humphrey. I'll try to make this fairly brief. We're not asking you to vote on anything tonight. This is a report only. There we go.
That's funny.
I bet it was on the last slide, which looks like the first slide. So it finished up. Just kind of want to bring you up to date. We've been talking about the budget since November, and so we've been through a lot of components. Again, this will be a pretty brief report. When we ask you to adopt the budget on June 6th, you'll have a much more detailed version. You do have in your packet tonight, in addition to this PowerPoint, you do have a one-page, more detailed summary of both the general fund, debt service fund, and the food service fund budgets, which at least lay them out by function and provide more information than this report will. Very quickly, since we met 2 weeks ago, we've made no change in revenue. We have added in the $10.5 million for the compensation package, which you approved earlier this evening, and also added money in for the positions that were approved at the May 2nd meeting. Quickly on the general fund budget summary, we have revenues and transfers in of $634.5 million, appropriations, which is really another word for expenditures and transfers out, of $641.3 million, and so that gives us a paper deficit, if you will, of about $6.8 million. So footnote explains $1.6 million of that, as we discussed back in April, is targeted fund balance usage for some of that would definitely be one-time expenditures, and some of it would be some action research items that we would use for a year or two and see if that's something that we wanted to continue.
Steve, pardon me for a moment. So
Yes,
in the
ma'am.
footnote, that 1.6 million, does that include the $1 million to put substitutes?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
That's continued to kind of weigh on me. I think that's an example where we're doing equal but not equitable. When I look at our challenged schools, to give the same help to a Meadows that we're giving to a Skaggs troubles me a little bit. And so I don't know if there's any opportunity to sort of re-envision that before we finalize the budget. Also, that's a huge initiative, and so to hop in with both feet into all 70 plus campuses, I don't know if there's an opportunity maybe to do something more time phased, start in our title schools, start in our more challenged schools first, versus deploying it so broadly. So I would love at some point, if not tonight, but to get some, or maybe tonight, to get some feedback from the administrative team in terms of what they think the viability is. But once again, the equity is really troubling me.
I think tonight would possibly be a good time to do that rather than waiting. If there's going to be any changes, we'd like that feedback tonight so we can make those final changes.
Yeah, well, I mean, if that's the board's desire, we can certainly go back into cabinet and determine, is there a subgroup? I mean, the board has heard, obviously, in a couple different settings when we had site-based folks here in our school improvement efforts, our in our teacher evaluation and reflective goal-setting efforts. Time is an issue, and you know, we are trying to do something that could strategically allow principals to find a block of time once a week. You know, many districts handle that or attempt to do that by, in some cases, closing early, and that has its own set of challenges for the community at large. We have had so many of our principals attempt to find ways to get that time for teachers. Some have taken actually instructional time away and kind of given it to the specials classes so that core area teachers have that time to engage in the kind of collective planning and learning and that we're asking them to engage in, and that they are doing, quite frankly, with a tremendous amount of effort. So, you know, we wanted it. The reason that we put it in the fund balance to begin with is that we did want to study it, understand if it's does it add the value and give us kind of the return on investment, both qualitative and quantitative, from our schools. You know, as I shared earlier, ironically, it is some of our Title I schools who have access to more individuals in coaching positions and so forth have actually had a little better opportunity to try to eke out some time. But again, those people are there because they're there to provide additional service for teachers and for students. And so, you know, we don't want to see them as the opportunity to be deploying for time. The idea is, can we call on some retirees who can deliver some quality units that we would like our curriculum folks, as well as some of our teacher leaders, to create. Because what we've also heard from our teachers is that if they have to just create the lesson, and you're really not saving them a lot of time, and in the end they worry about, is it being delivered in the way that they had hoped. So I agree with Mr. Fortenberry. Certainly we can come back with a subgroup of schools if that's the desire of the board. We just know it is, as I've been recently doubling back with our principals, and they just feel that tremendous work has been done within our teachers through our evaluation, our goal setting, the likes of which you heard, admittedly in a limited 6-teacher subset at the work session, and they're just saying, if we can find time, that we know that our teachers, will help kids in the end. We know when teachers talk to teachers, good things happen.
I don't disagree that everyone would like more time. I'm just reminded of a very visual representation that Dr. Solomon shared, the kid in the boxes. That's going to either come back to haunt you or come back and bring you glory, Yora. But the sample for my new colleagues is, you've got 3 kids trying to get over a fence. They're of different heights. If you give them each one box, you're not going to help the short kid at all, and the tall kid doesn't need it. And so we have some scenarios in our district where we've got some short kids that need help. And so if we just take this $1 million and spread it across all our schools, we're not going to close the achievement gap that we desperately need to. When you have Meadows Elementary, for example, with only 62% of the children passing the STAR test, in Plano, it needs to be B's or better, I think. And so I would really wish that we could look at something that we would pilot with our more challenged schools versus trying to be equal.
So I'm going to respectfully disagree with Tammy in this regard, that I will trust the district and acquiesce to how you guys roll this out. But the analogy of saying that the tall kid doesn't need any help, I don't think is accurate here, because all of our schools, all of our teachers, all of our principals are saying, yes, we need more time. And so it will benefit everybody to deploy this program equally across the district. Now, to the extent, we think that the benefit is so great in our challenged schools that it'll provide an immediate impact, then certainly, y'all can think about deploying them there first. But what I don't want to do is deprive a school of an opportunity to have this additional asset that the principal can use and that their teachers can use to improve their school as well, solely because we're focused on, a subset of schools. So, again, if we need to focus on a subset of schools to begin, that's one thing, but I don't want to suggest that I would support completely ignoring a group of schools simply because we think the need is not there. The need is there.
I have to agree with that, because I think when we talked about this in April, we talked about rolling it out for all schools. And if we're going to do a pilot, I think we're going to get better data if we expand it across the district. If you feel like you want to, employ it at the most challenged schools first, that's fine. But I have to say, I think we're going to get better data if we pilot this across the district, and we'll see how it's working. Because what if it doesn't work well in the challenged schools, but it would work well in another school? We won't know that. So I feel like we need to expand it as it was presented in April.
I want to offer something a little different. If you remember, when we provided the feedback from the reports from the National School Board Association, there was a session I attended, and I can't remember which state it was, but they did something that they called year-round school. And what the research before that showed that depending on the economic status of kids, the ones at the highest levels, they don't lose anything during the summer break. while the ones at the mid-level and the low economic statuses, they go back. They go back and they lose, if I remember correctly, by the time you hit 12th grade, I think they're about 3 years behind. And that program allowed them, and there was, in that state, there was state participation, because you need to pay the teachers to work during the summer. It's not the entire summer. It's part of the summer. They did about a month or a month and a half. That would be, and what they did was, by the way, they did that with the equivalent of our Title I school. So that's where their pilot is. And so far, they're very happy with the results, because those kids are the ones that during the summer will go back, and now all of a sudden you bring them back to school and you actually start them. If they just finished second grade, it was something like 10 days after the end of second grade, they come back to school to actually start third grade. And then when everybody else starts third grade, they're already slightly ahead, and so they don't go back. I would like us to consider doing something like this, and let's see what the state, because they are talking about the equivalent of what we have as the weighted average days in attendance, being paid by the state for that. Not entirely, because there's air conditioning and busing wherever needed, but that, especially at the elementary level, that could be something we can explore.
If I could interject too, I think it's important that we bring back that a lot of this isn't necessarily about new dollars in the equation as the first element too. So one of the things I just remind that we're in the process of doing, and I'd say this is an example of differential deployment of resources that exist within the structure of the district. So school improvement plans are an integral part of school improvement. We've been on a 5-year process of really upgrading the process of developing meaningful school improvement plans. You remember the core work initiative we did a few years ago? We converted that into our own internal tool. So one of the things that we've done very deliberately is we've gone back to those campus improvement plans to see if there are ways that we can provide differential support to campuses based on needs that they surface. Those don't always include, so it might be additional academic coaches going out and working with teachers in various places. It might be helping identify curriculum resource. It's a variety of things that are building capacity, as well as helping them understand and develop meaningful plans. So, I'd encourage us. So one of the things I think we have to remember too, in the context of testing, that all of those things don't necessarily show up immediately on a standardized test, especially the STAR test. We know that the STAR test isn't as responsive to previous measures to direct instruction. But we do have ways through those campus improvement plans that we're measuring progress. A lot of it happened, oftentimes are processes and procedures that, and we purposely have done these as multi-year plans, because we know that oftentimes the most important work, it's not as glamorous, but it takes many years to rebuild culture, to build pipelines of capacity, to really understand what some of the deeper issues are. So I really do say that that's an important part of this work, but an example of how we have differentially deployed staff resources to support, I'd say in your terms, the more needy schools. Some of those things were built into the budget that we brought forward. Some of those things weren't necessary to add additional dollars to do that differentiated support.
I don't want to be a heavy on a night that's been kind of one of celebration, but I do want to challenge us all, trustees and administration. We need to figure out how we can close this achievement gap. What's it going to take? What's the plan? How much money, if it's money, is it going to take? If you don't start moving the scores now, they will never move. And I think when I look again at a quarter of our elementary schools scoring below 80% on what's an imperfect test, I think that's still a huge cry to action for this combined body. We can't be content with that, and we can't say it's going to take 10 years, because by that time those children will have graduated from our system. So I think we need to get serious about developing that system to help. We've put, in my mind, some very well-intended Band-Aids We haven't really developed that integrated system of what it's going to take with resources, money, teachers, community to make a real change. We need to do the equivalent of the moonshot, where we're going to decide we're going to make this better and better quickly. And that's the challenge I put to all of us.
Okay.
Anyway,
we will discuss that some more before we bring you the final version in 3 weeks.
Can I ask, can we assume, at least at this moment, that we can continue working? We've got some curriculum and it's, some coordinators that are really beginning to develop the things that we would try to help retirees deliver, which I guess that's another good thing that we haven't talked a lot about. But rather than going to some consultant or Pearson, it's going to go to people who gave a career to the children of this community, who want to give back to teachers that they've left behind. That's another positive element. Do we have agreement that we can at least continue moving forward with some of the planning aspects of that? Am I hearing that? Because
I don't think there's a disagreement on the program.
Okay.
I think to Tammy's point, it was a question of deployment and use, and that's where the conversation was never a question of actually continuing with that work.
Thank you.
but again, I would really want us to look at year-round school.
Okay.
As one option to.
And I want to clarify,
yeah.
Dr. Solomon, you're talking about year-round in additional. There are schools that use, so it's called a balanced calendar.
Mm-hmm.
And it's year-round, but it's not more days. You're talking about adding more days.
Yes, yes, to Title I schools especially, and especially at the elementary level. I really encourage you to take a look at that program, that specific program, and see what we can learn from it.
For specific schools.
I would start with Title I schools, yes, because that's exactly the gap that's building. That gap is building because they come into school. They're 6 months. If you look at their language, math skills, they're 6 months behind by the time they get out of and it's elementary school, not 12th grade. By the time they get out of elementary school, they're 2.5 to 3 years behind, and where they lose that is during the summer. So if we can make that up as a pilot and see how that works. Part of it should be funded by the state. Should.
Yeah, Ms. Fortenberry, I don't know if we're in a position to assume that is true, but
yeah, that part would have to be worked out. I think for moving forward purposes, my suggestion would be that we leave the $1 million in the budget, but then the details of how that's going to roll out be worked out. But we go ahead and leave that in the budget. I think the discussion about year-round school is, if that's something that we want to pursue, that's fine, but that's really not going to be a 2017-18.
Yeah.
That would be something that would not get rolled out for the next school year, since the next school year starts in about 3 months.
Let's just make sure we don't have the same conversation a year from now.
Promise. Okay. Our estimated fund balance at the end of this year is about $203 million. And so even if we pull that $6.8 million out of fund balance, we'd still end next year in the year with $196 million of fund balance. Some potential mitigating factors that could make that $6.8 million difference disappear. 2 or 3 things. There's still possible legislative action to increase the basic allotment. House Bill 21, if it were passed as originally proposed, we would pick up about $9.8 million. The Senate Education Committee passed their own committee substitute for House Bill 21, which attached voucher provision to it for special education students. And so really don't know in the next 14 days or 15 days how that's going to turn out. Time is slipping away this legislative session. There is quite a bit of discussion that the Senate and House may not arrive at a compromise they can agree to, and we may end up in special session. But there's still hope that even if that 9.8 isn't approved, that something could be approved maybe halfway in between where we'll pick up some money. We also historically underspend their budget by 2 to 2.5%, so that would definitely wipe out that deficit. And again, even in the worst case that we did actually pull down the fund balance by that amount, our fund balance would still exceed 30% of the budget. So we're in a very good position. Just don't want you to be alarmed when you see a number that has brackets around it. For the food service fund budget, or our PANS budget, we'll be presenting a budget that will draw down fund balance by about $1.5 million. We have historically underspent that budget by $750,000 to $1 million, so we wouldn't anticipate that we'd actually pull it down that much. Again, even if we did, we'd end the year next year with $5.2 million, which would be about 20% fund balance level, and the federal government doesn't allow us to have more than 25%, so we'd be staying within that target level. The debt service fund budget, we're showing it balanced. The revenues and transfers in are based on the 26.9 cent tax rate that we discussed earlier this evening. The appropriations include, I didn't write down the amount, I think about $13.5 million of the $131.9 million appropriations is a placeholder for this summer's bond sale. Actually, it'd be the payments next year on the bonds that we would sell in August. So we've worked that into the budget to end up with a balanced budget, and we'll discuss that more in the weeks and months ahead for the debt service fund. We do have a pretty healthy fund balance in debt service fund. It's over $40 million, but we have, especially for you two new board members, on our bonds, we make payments twice a year. We make a February 15th payment, which is principal and interest, and then there's an August 15th payment, which is interest only. So we have a large payment in August, which is the reason we need a pretty large fund balance, because we've already collected all of our taxes by then, just about all. And so we need that balance to make that August 15th payment. If you go back to November, we adopted 7 budget goals. And as we do each year, at this point, kind of wanted to show you the items in the budget that we think indicate that we've addressed those goals with the proposed budget. And I won't read you every line on here, but the first is a balanced budget. We said at least if it wasn't balanced because of recapture problems with the state, would at least maintain an adequate fund balance. And so I definitely think we've done that, and it might end up actually with a surplus budget. The second item was to strategically target additional resources to high-need students. I won't read through the fairly lengthy list there. It includes some of those items for Title I schools, but it also includes money for high-need students in schools that may not be Title I. Overall, if you added up that list, there's about $2.9 million in additional resources targeted to high-need students, with about 1.3 million of it, which is a little less than half, being the additional expansion of the pre-K program that we have planned for this coming school year. The other 5 goals is to maintain teacher staffing ratios, which we've done. That actually resulted in a net decrease in teachers as our enrollment is projected to drop slightly. But that savings was plowed back into the enhancements that you saw on the previous page. Tonight you adopted the employee compensation package, which enhances our compensation levels. You also wanted to incorporate the work of the community-based academy committees. There were 2 of those. One was the primary years, our elementary program, and of course we added the primary years IB program at Huffman. There's over $300,000 included in the budget for next year for that endeavor. And then also we continue with the development cost associated with the Secondary Industries Academy. And so there's primarily money for additional planning included for that project. We do have several efficiencies in the budget. By far the largest is a decrease of $973,000 in our utility cost, as about a year and a half or two ago, we were able to negotiate a forward contract on our electricity purchase, which kicked in January, but we'll have a full year of it next year. And then lastly, we continue to monitor legislative action. The budget that we showed you tonight does reflect an increase in the golden penny yield, which is something that was in both the Senate and House versions of the appropriations bill. It's not over till it's over, but since that one's approved by both, we think it has a good chance of standing, so we've included it. We have adjusted the per capita rates to reflect an updated estimate, and the pending legislation on House Bill 21 could add a further positive impact to our estimates. So that's an update, and we'll bring your proposed budget. We'll send it out obviously before the June 6th meeting, but we'll be asking you to adopt it at that meeting.
All right, thank you very much for that budget presentation. Now we will move on to item 11D, which is our legislative update. At this time, updates on the status of proposed legislation potentially affecting the district will be shared. Ms. Oliver, do you have comments about the legislative report that is in our
Just a quick comment. We don't have to go through the entire report. It's really supplied for your benefit. I will say that we have begun to edit down and really try to categorize bills that particularly pertain to our priorities. The bills of interest that we've talked about before are frankly not so interesting anymore. So we've begun to edit the report down just a bit in that regard, and we've already begun compiling what we would consider in the past our scorecard. Just so we'll have a record of that. If the board wants to see that, we'll have it. It's not ready yet, but we're going to begin to try to track that and mount those votes and the legislation that's passed. So we'll have that available. But other than that, most of the information that Mr. Fortenberry spoke about earlier is in your report.
Okay, great. Thank you. I think there was commentary earlier about House Bill 486. And that is the bill that would have given the school districts the flexibility in the years that the district can afford to lower its M&O tax rate, but go back to that previously voted on $1.17 rate in the instance that we would need to be able to have revenues to pay our recapture or for whatever reason. Apparently, we found out late this afternoon that 486 has died, like you said, a cruel death. I didn't know if I was going to, we talked about perhaps discussion at the board table. I was going to invite commentary if anybody wanted to.
So the mystery is the House approved it, went to the Senate. In the Senate Education Committee, it seemed that the committee chair looked upon the bill favorably, and it mysteriously disappeared from the calendar of the Senate committee. Perhaps for reasons unknown, that bill has been pulled and won't be considered. And it seems to be that bill is now dead, which is a real shame because when we talked about this, and Steve and I have talked about this bill, the example we share with our representatives when we asked them to support this was that it could have saved us $10 million in recapture had we had the flexibility to raise and lower our M&O rate without having to seek a TRE to get it raised back up. We are not going to be given that opportunity, and it seems to be that bill is now dead and gone.
Just to clarify, you said raise and lower. The idea was that we have passed the TRE. We are at the $1.17. What we wanted to do is be able to, if we don't need the entire $1.17, go down 1 year, go back up to what was already approved, the same level that was already approved. We were not trying to go above this. The issue and the first faced issues at the House because they did not want to give us the ability to raise the rate without public voting. The thing is that it's taking it out of context, because the entire context is we lower it and bring it back to exactly what it was before, not above. So for a year or two or more, we can collect less taxes because we don't need them. But if we lower it and we have to ask, again, issue a TRE to raise it back to what was approved before, and it does not pass, like it happened in Frisco, then now another year we get $40-something million extra of
46.
Yeah, that still is 40-something extra next year to pay in recapture. Now we need the money and we can't get it. We're going to face exactly what Frisco ISD is facing. So that ties our hands, and now we keep it at $1.17.
Right.
Yeah, the shame in this, and the way that the system has evolved, is that if a district is going to raise taxes, it is incentivized to raise its tax rate to the maximum amount of $1.17, and once that $1.17 is approved, to never ever change it again. And we are in a situation, unfortunately, where it seems that philosophy has trumped common sense. Political philosophy has trumped common sense. Common sense tells you if the voters have approved, and it was the ability, the time period in which you could raise and lower the rate was limited. And that if you have a limited time of period where voters have approved $1.17, but you don't need $1.17, collect what you need. That's what that was the ask. The fact that this thing can't get through to the governor's desk for execution is absolutely astounding. And the cynic in me says they don't want to sign a bill like that because they need the money.
Yeah.
They need our recapture. And so why give school districts the ability to lower their taxes, lower their recapture payment, when the state needs those dollars and can use them however they're going to use them?
Well, I have to agree, but I think it's one of three reasons. But the cynic in me says the same thing. They don't want to forego the revenue that they know is here, but perhaps they don't understand what we were trying to get accomplished with that bill. But I think we've communicated those facts pretty clearly. Or perhaps the state legislature wants to be the one that is going to wear the shiny medal that they've lowered taxes, and they don't want to give the school boards that flexibility. But the point is, we levy the tax. We should have say-so in if we can lower it and provide meaningful property tax relief to our taxpayers. We should have that opportunity. And Mr. Fortenberry, it seems to me that we did an estimate earlier in the year that based on the average home value, if we were able to lower the tax rate by approximately 3-point-something pennies, we could save somewhere in the neighborhood of $139 per homeowner.
I think it was 130 something.
Yeah.
It was 3.8 cents, which I think was or maybe it was 112. It was over $100.
Yeah, and that's meaningful.
That's more than they're going to get from challenging their appraisal.
And I think I gave these statistics at the meeting 2 weeks ago, so if I have, forgive me, but I'll give them again. There are 442 districts in the state that have gone through a TRE, and for the current tax year, only 27 of them adopted a rate less than the maximum authorized by the TRE, which to me is absolute proof that the system is not working, and it's a disincentive for districts to lower the tax rate. If less than 7% of them have done so. So we viewed this as an opportunity to cut taxes. I think the powers that be viewed it as somehow thinking we were wanting to raise taxes.
I think that's what they wanted us to think, but I think they really don't want to forego the revenue that we would have collected. I really think that's it. Are there any other bills that you want to bring forward and discuss or ask questions about that are currently going through the process?
I think the taxparency bill that Senator Taylor sponsored, did pass the Senate, and the House it's Senate Bill 1407, and it would provide some additional information on property owners' tax bills, which would show them at least the percentage of their bill that's going to the state. That's been referred to the House Ways and Means. I'm not sure that it's been scheduled for hearing yet.
Okay,
But it has made its way through the Senate.
that's good to hear.
There is one bill that I wanted to mention, and that's House Bill 1336. Actually, it is by our Representative Jeff Leach, or one of our representatives, Jeff Leach, and it actually was originated here in Plano. That talks about if we talk about transparency, the transparency of the cost of testing. And that, I think, we already know. If you have kids in school, you know that we test them and test them and test them and test them, and there is no transparency of how much it costs. Not just in cost of what we pay Pearson or any other test provider, but in school days. And Susan, you remember when I asked you, is it normal that our kids go to school, and if this is a STAR test, there is a STAR test in their school, they're not the ones taking it? That's a free day. They do nothing at school. I mean, my daughter goes to school with a blanket that day because there's almost nothing to do. So that is a bill that is still, I believe, in the process, and I hope that one is going to pass.
I think since that one's a House bill, there was a deadline last week for the House to pass its own bills, and the process got severely slowed down, and that bill probably died because it didn't get heard by the full House by the deadline.
Yeah, the update, I'm sure, I looked it up. It's saying that it was sent to calendars, but it was never went any further than that. So it's dead, probably.
Unless if they can amend it on to the bill that's still alive.
Well, one thing that we can do is we can ourselves decide to, just like we're not going to give up on taxparency. We're going to make sure that taxpayers know exactly what percentage of their taxes goes to the state. Maybe we do the same thing here, and we assess how much we spend on testing and share that information.
All right.
I rest.
All right, then I guess that's all of our discussion on the legislative report. Ms. Oliver, thank you for keeping us updated all legislative session. We appreciate that. Now we are at item 12, policies. And at most of our regular meetings, we have policies on the agenda for the board's consideration. These policies have undergone prior review by the district's attorney and by each board member. I invite Carla Oliver to introduce these policies. Ms. Oliver?
Thank you. I present policy BBB local in regard to board members. This is the series of policies that particularly pertain to board members in regard to elections. This policy is presented for approval under first reading and will be presented for adoption under second reading at a subsequent meeting. And if you notice in the edits in your packet, it's in regard to the terms that the board serve and when the elections would occur. So it's just updating the language.
All right. Do I have a motion to approve item A, BBB local on the first reading?
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
Any discussion?
One quick question. One of the changes here is the reference to Education Code 11.059. So has that changed?
I'm sorry, here. I just don't think that reference belonged where it was.
Okay. Thank you.
All right. No more discussion. I'll call for a vote. All those in favor of the motion, please raise your hand. And the motion carries unanimously. And the next item is item B, BE local. Ms. Oliver?
Thank you. BE local pertains to board meetings. This policy is presented for approval under first reading and will be presented for adoption under second reading at a subsequent meeting like our previous policy. And this needs to be updated to reflect current practices as well as an agreed protocol for addressing agenda items that have time limitations and expire.
All right, thank you. Do I have a motion to approve item B, which is BE local, on the first reading?
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
Any discussion? All right, hearing none, I'll call for a vote. All those in favor of the motion, please raise your hand. And the motion carries. We'll move on to item 12C, which is FFG Exhibit, Student Welfare, Child Abuse and Neglect on the first reading. Ms. Oliver?
Thank you. This is, the exhibit is presented for review. And again, we'll present it as a second review, but doesn't require a vote by you, but we always vote on the review. I know that's confusing, but just the acknowledgement. This exhibit is presented for review under first reading and will be presented again at a second reading. This revision is actually requested in order to update contact information, so there's just a new title and phone number that's inserted, not the person's name, but the title. And then as well, I wanted to bring your attention to, at the bottom, 1 of 2, the revision is requested in regard to calling the hotline. Staff members are asked in any capacity or whatever, when we have the responsibility of reporting that, to do that in person rather than going online and doing that. And so that's been the request, and the policy's been edited to reflect that.
All right, thank you. Do I have a motion to review item C, FFG Exhibit on first reading?
So moved.
Is there a second?
I second.
Any discussion? All right, I'll call for a vote. All those in favor, please raise your hand. And the motion carries unanimously. All right, we are now at item 13, which is the conclusion of public comments session on non-agenda items. Ms. Oliver, do we have any speaker cards?
We do not.
All right, then. With no further business, this meeting of the Board of Trustees is adjourned.